Chapter 4. South Africa. When Gandhi arrived alone in South Africa in May 1893, he found that it was deeply divided. The Dutch and British had come to South Africa in the 17th and 18th centuries. They had taken land from the black people who had lived there for thousands of years and made those people into servants. In 1893, South Africa was divided into 4 parts: Natal, which was ruled by the British, the Cape, a British colony which had its own government, and the Transvaal and Orange Free State, which were both ruled as independent countries by Dutch farmers called the Boers. There were many different people in South Africa at that time, white people with different languages and different ideas, and many groups of black people who had different religions and languages and lived in different ways. There were also groups that were referred to as coloured people, Asians who the Dutch had brought to South Africa to work for them, and from 1860, Indians. Some Indians were brought to South Africa by the British to work on farms as indentured workers for 5 years, and others, free Indians, came to buy and sell things there. In the Transvaal, for example, there were 650,000 black people, 120,000 whites, and about 5,000 Indians. The whites did all the important jobs and behaved very badly towards the Indians and blacks. In some parts of South Africa, Indians and blacks were not allowed to walk on pavements, and they could only go out in the evenings if they had a letter from their boss. In other parts, they were not allowed to own land or buy or sell things. Gandhi had come to South Africa to work and make some money, but he quickly found out what life there was like for Indian people, or coolies, as the British called them. Gandhi's boat from India had arrived in Durban, in Natal, and he had to make a long overnight journey from there to Pretoria in the Transvaal, where he was going to work. Gandhi was given a first-class train ticket for the first part of the journey, but when he sat in the first-class area, 2 rail officials told him to move to third class. "But I have a first-class ticket," Gandhi replied. He refused to move seats, so the officials called a policeman. Gandhi was taken off the train, and that night he had to stay in a cold, empty station. Gandhi could not believe what had happened, and he lay awake thinking. Should he go back to India now? Should he finish his work and then go back? Or should he stay in South Africa and fight against this kind of prejudice? The next morning, Gandhi spoke to other Indian people who told him more terrible stories about the way whites behaved towards them. For the next part of his journey, he had to travel by stagecoach, and because he was Indian, he was not allowed to sit inside. He did not argue against this, but when a stagecoach official told him to sit on the floor, he refused. The official then began hitting him and tried to push him out of the stagecoach until some of the other passengers stopped him. On the next train that Gandhi had to take, he was again told to move to the third-class area by a rail official. This time, an Englishman in the first-class area told the official to go away, and Gandhi was able to use his first-class ticket. This journey from Durban to Pretoria changed Gandhi's life. A week after arriving in Pretoria, Gandhi asked all the Indians in the town to come to a meeting where he made his first public speech. He wanted to talk to the Indian people about their lives and ways of improving them. The meetings continued, and Gandhi soon knew every Indian in Pretoria. Gandhi's work for the law firm in Pretoria went well, and he learnt a lot about the law. He learnt other things during his year in Pretoria too. He met many Christians and read books about Christianity and other religions. Many of the people he met wanted him to become a Christian or a Muslim, but Gandhi was beginning to believe that Hinduism was the right religion for him. He also read many other books during his year in South Africa, including works by the Russian writer Leo Tolstoy, who had many important ideas which interested Gandhi. Tolstoy had been born into a rich, important family, but when he was nearly 60, he began living a simpler life. He farmed with the peasants, stopped eating meat, and started wearing simple clothes. He believed he should live as his religious beliefs told him to. Gandhi said that Tolstoy's "The Kingdom of God is Within You" moved him deeply and taught him that violence was wrong. When Gandhi had finished his work in Pretoria and was in Durban getting ready to sail back to India, he heard some important news. At that time, free Indians in Natal could vote, but the government there was planning to introduce a new law that would take away the Indians' vote. Gandhi's friends asked him to stay and fight against the new law, and he agreed to stay in Durban for another month. He wrote many letters arguing against the new law, and he organized petitions, long lists where people wrote their names to show they did not agree. The petitions and letters did not stop the government, and the new law was introduced. But something special was beginning to happen among the Indians in South Africa. Indians of different religions, Muslims, Hindus, Parsis, and Christians, and Indians who had many different kinds of job, all helped Gandhi with his letters and petitions. They were beginning to work together to try and improve their lives. Gandhi had promised to stay in South Africa for another month, but the Durban Indians now asked him to stay for longer. They knew that they needed his help, and Gandhi knew it too. He agreed to stay, found a house in Durban, and said that he would work as a barrister for the Indian people. In May 1894, Gandhi and some of his friends set up a political party, the Natal Indian Congress, NIC. They did this just in time, as there was another difficult change to come for the Indian people of Natal. Some of the indentured workers who had finished their 5 years on farms had decided to stay in South Africa and work there. The whites were worried about this and wanted the Indians to return home, so a new tax was put on any Indian who stayed in Natal after the end of his indenture. And because the tax was the same as 6 months' pay for an indentured worker, Indians, with Gandhi and the NIC behind them, were furious about it. By 1896, Gandhi had become a very good barrister and an important person in Indian politics in South Africa. He spoke at many meetings, organized lots of petitions, and wrote letters to newspapers about the difficulties of life for Indians in South Africa. He also made many friends, Indians, whites, and blacks, and he could talk easily with both the poorest and most important people he met. He had shown that he was extremely hard-working. He understood that white people were nervous because there were so many more Indians and black people than whites in South Africa. But because India was part of the British Empire, he wanted the laws the British made in South Africa to be the same for Indians and white people. Gandhi knew that whites would always be treated better than Indians, but he hoped that if South Africa's laws were fair, Indian people's lives would slowly start to improve.